Welcome back to Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin, and it is good to be back in my role here as TV presenter. Over the last few weeks, in case you haven't noticed, I've been out on the campaign trail running for office, representing Reform UK in the Gorton and Denton by-election, and I learned a great deal about the mood of the country and what's on the minds of the British people. And later in the show, I'll be sharing some of those reflections when we're joined by the oracle of British politics himself, Sir John Curtis. We're going to talk about the rise of the Greens and the fragmentation of our politics. But before we get to that, I have to say this. Things were getting a little bit crazy when I left, but I've come back to find things have really gone completely crazy, because the latest proposal from Labour's Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood might be one of the most astonishing immigration policies I've ever seen in my life. The plan: pay the families of failed asylum seekers up to £40,000. That's £40,000 of British taxpayers' money to leave the UK. Yes, you heard that right. The government argues that this small pilot scheme will somehow act as a deterrent. It will stop people from coming over in the small boats. And people who are considering coming to Britain illegally will apparently see this policy and they will think twice. But I put it to you that if you ever wanted to design a policy that actually encourages illegal immigration, it would look remarkably like the one that's just been tabled by Shabana Mahmood. Think about it. You risk the journey to Britain, you make your asylum claim, and if that claim fails, you could walk away still with tens of thousands of pounds from the British taxpayer to go home, money that could easily then be used to try the journey all over again. And we're told that this is sensible because it's cheaper than putting illegal migrants and asylum seekers in luxury hotels, which are currently costing the country millions of pounds every single day. But I have a radical suggestion for everybody out there. I have a suggestion that may ruffle some feathers on the Labour benches. Why don't we deal with the root of this problem instead? Why don't we leave the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, which repeatedly blocks Britain from enforcing its own immigration laws? Why don't we repeal Tony Blair's Human Rights Act, which enshrines the ECHR into domestic UK law, which empowers a whole army of unelected, bureaucratic, woke, left-leaning lawyers? And why don't we do what many other countries already do around the world? Why don't we detain and deport people who come here illegally and process their claims offshore, away from hotels, away from the British people? Instead, this Labour government is choosing the opposite approach. It is incentivising the illegal migration crisis. It's making it worse. The British public are being asked to hand over tens of thousands of pounds to people whose asylum claims have already been rejected. It is absolutely mind-boggling, and to be frank, it is an insult to the British people. For many voters, it is going to feel like yet another moment where the political class in Westminster, and especially Keir Starmer, Shabana Mahmood and the Labour government, have completely lost touch with the country and the people they are supposed to represent. And frankly, I think it's another ridiculous moment from what is rapidly becoming the most ridiculous government in my lifetime.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Well, to discuss all of this, I wanted to get the thoughts now of somebody who knows much more about immigration policy in this country than anybody else, Research Director for the Centre for Migration Control, Rob Bates. Rob, surely the Labour Party do not think this policy is going to make a dent in the illegal migration crisis, giving families of failed asylum seekers £40,000. Goodness knows what that means for people from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from India. I mean, it's a mountain of gold. Surely they don't think this is going to make a difference.
Well, it far surpasses even the average median annual salary of a British worker. £40,000 is a huge amount of money, and the Labour government has actually so far already thrown £40 million bribing illegal migrants to leave this country. I think it's important to realise why they think this is in any way appropriate, and that is because effectively the UK government is regularly blackmailed and forced into this position where it cannot remove illegal migrants, people who've come into the country without our permission, because these individuals have endless rights to make asylum claims. They have endless rights to the ECHR, judicial review and so forth. And that really frustrates the process of removing them. All the while we're paying for their accommodation, we're paying for their legal aid, we're paying effectively for their round-the-clock care and support. And unfortunately, actually, what the Labour government are admitting with this policy is they have no plans to remove some of the impediments that make it difficult for the government to detain and deport illegal migrants. And instead, they're going to give in and actually start throwing money at those that are broken in. And this is inevitably going to be a pull factor. £40,000 is a huge amount of money. It's about £3,000 at the moment for an illegal migrant, sort of, if we're saying to them, look, we'll give you this money if you go back to your country of origin. This is a threefold increase on that. It's a huge, huge uptick. And actually, really, all it is going to do is incentivise more people to get in touch with the people smugglers and come to Britain illegally.
So let's just say I'm a migrant coming over on one of the small boats from Pakistan, and I try and get into the country. I arrive illegally. I file an asylum claim. That's rejected. The government says, look, here's 10,000 quid. In fact, if I've got a family, here's 40,000, time for you to go. I say, OK, right, and back I go. What's to stop me from trying to do that again with the money in my pocket?
Well, the government will say that they sort of take biometric data off an individual, but we're seeing with the one-in, one-out deal with France that actually already individuals that have come into the UK and been removed to France are then coming back to the UK. So it's a very clear precedent. This is actually something that does take place. I think the Labour government want to give the impression that once an individual has been paid to leave, they've wiped their hands of them, and therefore that individual is no longer coming back to the UK. But it's a very real risk, and we have to understand actually what some of the key features of those coming across the channel is, which is that these individuals often are connected to networks of individuals already in the UK, and therefore actually the wherewithal to arrive in this country is already far greater than perhaps the Labour government recognises. And I think this just really lays bare that they don't understand the underlying dynamics of this small boats crisis, which is the huge incentive structure that is in place to try and make it to the UK. And unfortunately, actually, this is just compounding the problem. I'm
going to bring the panel in a second, but just before I do, let me just talk about Shabana Mahmood for a minute, right? Now, a lot of blue Labour people, you know, Lord Glasman and others on the sort of right of the Labour Party, if there indeed is such a thing, would say, look, Shabana Mahmood she's being tough, she's being responsible, she is the only hope the Labour Party has of sort of triangulating reform on the right and the Greens on the left, that she's sort of trying to occupy this position that is broadly in line with where the British public are. I mean, there is that argument, isn't there, that actually while Shabana Mahmood is deeply unpopular among Labour MPs, who have obviously been speaking on WhatsApp groups this week, we've seen them be leaked, they said, well, these new proposals are far too right-wing for the Labour Party. But there is this argument, isn't there, that actually Shabana Mahmood is probably the last hope the Labour Party have of holding on to places like the Red Wall, places like Wales, areas of the country that are full of working class voters that are deeply, deeply frustrated with what's happening on the borders.
I think she's the furthest right we'd get within the Labour government, but as we've seen today, there are a baying mob of backbenchers that are just desperate at the opportunity to tear down any of her plans when it comes to settlement for legal migrants. And I think when it does come to the fact that they have to introduce legislation, she's going to face a huge proposal. But let's not kid ourselves here that somehow Shabana Mahmood actually has the answers to this problem, because at the very heart of her asylum plan is the fact that illegal migrants who come into our country illegally will still have the right to claim settlement. They will have the right to have off-ramps onto different visa types, and then ultimately they're on a pathway at that point towards citizenship. So she's really actually skewed where the pitch was with the last Conservative government and actually where other centre-right parties are as well when it comes to this conversation. I think actually what she is offering is a lot of tough rhetoric, but behind-the-scenes pathways for a real compounding of this crisis.
Let me just bring in the panel here, Poppy Coburn. I mean, I'm hearing rumours in Westminster about a Labour defection to reform, and I'm starting to think it might be Shabana Mahmood.
She'd probably be the only one who could actually fit into the party without feeling very uncomfortable every day.
But what do you make of this plan?
I mean, the first thing I thought when I read this story was of the Ethiopian sex offender from Epping Forest. Unfortunately, it wasn't that long ago, but so much has happened since then, so many unfortunate stories. He was the man that sexually assaulted a teenage girl outside of McDonald's. And that obviously became a massive scandal because people then protested outside the Asylum Hotel, which he was being housed
This was the Bell Hotel.
Taxpayer expense, of course. And then there was an absolute farce of him actually escaping from custody early, him being released from prison in some kind of administrative mishap, and then him travelling around London with an avocado tote bag. I mean, unbelievable. But the part of the story it reminded me of is the fact that he was deported and given money in the process of being deported. Yeah. What kind of message does that send? You break into the country illegally, you sexually assault a child, and we will give you money. And there's nothing to stop you from coming back. Because we haven't taken control of our borders. You could get on a boat and come back again.
Reform also say that financial payments for voluntary deportations
are okay. But the difference between Labour and Reform is that Reform is saying, we are going to stop the boats. So once people have left, they're gone. How have they done so far?
Well,
the highest level of boat crossings we've ever had.
Is this going to make a difference, Kai, given, as Poppy's saying, the taps are going to stay on, the boats are going to keep coming? The numbers are up, aren't they, last year? The numbers 41,000, over 40,000. Yeah. The numbers aren't coming down, they're going up. So how on earth is this going to make a difference?
Well, I think this is another classic example, Matt, of missing the wood for the trees. This isn't the only policy that Shabana Mahmood is announcing. She already announced a raft of asylum measures that are the biggest reform in asylum, the provisions we have for asylum.
But the numbers are still going up.
Ever. That's one thing. Now she's come back for more, right? And you make out that Shabana Mahmood's an outlier because of this letter that's going around, 100 or so MPs against it. That's a lot of MPs not against it, right? She's not an outlier. She's doing exactly what's right for the British people.
Rob Bates, just briefly before we move on, if this doesn't work, if the small boat numbers keep going up, the number of asylum claims keep going up, and Labour continues to lose control, where on earth does the party go then?
They've got nowhere left to go because they have categorically ruled out doing what is necessary, which includes leaving the ECHR. This is really a last gasp plan put in place by the Labour government. Unfortunately, it doesn't change the fundamentals. And really, actually, when it comes to the fact that they're still going to permit asylum claims, for instance, from individuals that have arrived on study or work visas as well, that's a huge problem. And frankly, it's an absolute abomination. An individual that's effectively lied to get a visa and come into the UK is able to claim asylum. They're not changing any of the fundamentals such as that. They've also said individuals that arrive illegally will still be able to claim asylum. Again, that is ridiculous. Well, so she's not changed any of them.
I'm happy to be wrong. Sometimes I am. But my hunch here is the Labour Party is going to get dragged leftwards on immigration, partly in response to the rise of the Greens. But let's see, because coming up, we've got to move on. President Trump has said there will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender, as he pledges to restore American strength and make